So, happy, lovely day. I hope you're having a great day. And I want to start by saying I tend not to read books like this. And not because of the genre, but because of specific things that I generally don't like. And generally, I don't like following characters who are married. Yeah, that's weird. I know, but I generally don't enjoy having reading a book where there is a married couple. However, I made an exception to pick this book up because, and I'll be really honest with you, I'm gonna when I read you the synopsis, I don't think it'll make sense to you, but it definitely makes sense to me considering my uh, interest in darker books and in violence and graphic themes in my fiction that I read. I love graphic violence in my fiction. I know how that sounds, and it's fine. I know how it sounds. But the point is that the reason I specifically picked it up is because one of my favorite booktubers reviewed this book, and I decided to pick it up because the synopsis that she gave, and I'm gonna be very honest, that the synopsis that she gave and the way that I literally knew almost everything about the book when I read it, but that usually doesn't matter to me. Spoilers don't matter. But the synopsis that she gave sounded hilarious. It sounded like I would be in for a comedy, even though it's kind of like a horror book. Well, I wouldn't say horror. I would say psychological thriller. When I googled it, it was definitely labeled as mainly psychological thriller. But the point is, to me, it sounded hilarious. It sounded like something I would be laughing at. So that is like why I picked it up. And I put it in my wish list. And the day I read it, because I read it in one sitting, I was in the mood for something weird. So I decided to pick it up. So that is the reason I picked this up. I thought I would mention the backstory. But now we're going to get to the review. But before I do, I just want to give a quick reminder and some self promotion. If you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. I post as frequently as I can, usually at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That way, whenever you wake up in the days that I post, you'll basically have something to watch. There is no there will be something for you to watch, usually on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. But also I do post other times a week, and my bonus videos, that's when any bonus videos come in. So you will have something to watch if you are interested. I like to post very early in the morning, that way people have something to watch. Also, other things, consider subscribing to my blog, which will be linked in the description. I do very similar things, just in text format, and I also share links, that way you can see it if you for the videos, that way you can, if you didn't catch it, you can definitely see the links there. But I definitely share reviews. I also do sometimes create some creative. I'm also sharing my creative work there as well. That way you can, I talk a lot about my writing. While I don't outright give advice, I do talk about my writing and how far I've come with that on Wednesdays. So you can definitely, check out my writing and judge it for yourself. It's completely fine for me. So it is available to you through my blog. So yeah, let's get to the synopsis of this book. Meet Hannah. She's the sweet but silent angel in the adoring eyes of her daddy. He's the only person who understands her, and all Hannah wants is to live happily ever after with him. But mommy stands in her way, and she'll try any trick she can think of to get rid of her, ideally for good. Meet Suzette. She loves her daughter, really, but after years of expulsions and strained homeschooling, her precarious health and sanity are weakening day by day as Hannah's tricks become increasingly sophisticated and Suzette's husband remains blind to the failing family dynamics. Suzette starts to fear that there is something seriously wrong and that maybe home isn't the best place for their baby girl after all. So, I think you can tell why this might be a psychological thriller based on this synopsis, and also why I titled this review the way I did. It is one of those things that definitely happens. You know, I don't usually type reviews on Goodreads, but I'm deciding to do that, to do like a one sentence review on Goodreads now, or try to do a sentence review. And the one thing I put on my on my review for Goodreads is the one thing I told you now. I was in the mood to read something weird. This gave me everything I needed. That was, well, two sentences. I don't want to make really long reviews on Goodreads. But point is, I think you can kind of tell that this book is a lot of things. So let's talk about the the writing. The prose is pretty good. It's accessible. It's easy to read. By the way, I read this as an audiobook. That's how I consumed it. I definitely recommend the audiobook. The narrator does so much just to get this for us to kind of understand. Like the narrator does pretty much everything possible to get us to realize, like, no, this is not good. Like, she does everything. It's so hard for me to just, like, I don't know, she does everything. Like, there is singing, there is a little bit of singing, there's a little bit of like the way that she talks, it's like, so it's good, you guys. I say go for the audiobook for this, just because the immersion of reading this as an audiobook is definitely good. At least for me it was, and for anyone who might listen to audiobooks, this is pretty good. Actually, the booktuber I mentioned is with Cindy. She's the one that kind of reviewed this stuff, and she has she has some clips of the audiobooks. She did 2 parts, so I'll link the reviews in the description, because honestly this sounded hilarious. And the reason to me that this sounded hilarious is because it is a child trying to get rid of her mother. And I found this hilarious because, I don't know, it just sounded like a comedy to me. I knew going in what to expect, but I swear I really thought I was gonna laugh. And while I found certain scenes funny, I do think there are things that this book was trying to do, and I think it did really well. So, the prose is good, the pacing, amazing. I enjoyed the characters. I liked the way Suzette was portrayed. I'll be honest and say I do like the father, but I will say that there were moments as a reader where I got so annoyed with him. Like, he is not home, and he's like, Hannah wouldn't do that. Hannah wouldn't do this. No, these people are wrong. And I'm just like, dude. If so many people are telling you this, something's wrong. And if your wife is telling you this, something's really wrong. And you're not home. I don't care how adorable your child is. You're not home to witness anything she does. So at that point, and that's why I was like, why? It reminds me, there was a scene where, I'm gonna go into spoilers a bit here. Well, at least for this one, there's a scene where she wakes up with thumbtacks tacked to her foot. Well, not tacked to her foot. She wakes up. She steps on. Suzette wakes up, and she's barefoot, of course, when she wakes up. So she it's about to go on the floor, and something pinches her foot. Like, something like she feels pain. And it turns out that Hannah had left thumbtacks on the floor, so that she wakes up and gets and gets like to and basically gets her thumbtacks on her foot or feet, really, right? And by this point, the dad is aware that something is wrong, but but you know, instead of calling 911 though, she calls the dad, and I'm like, no, your child did this to you. You call 911. You don't call a dude that is mainly useless in the book. Now, I will say, I say this as a reader, but also I can kind of understand what happened. He was very blind to it because she was always nice to him. The child was always kind of like, always presenting a different face with her father. And also, it is revealed why he also struggled to believe Suzette and other people. And the reason to me makes sense. I get it, but I was just like, that man's useless. In my head, I'm just like, dude is useless. And I know, as much as I understand it, I get it. Other things I think the book did well is it seems like it was putting some commentary. Now this is how I interpret it. A little bit of commentary on the stresses of being a stay-at-home mom, and in general of being parents. And I mean, yes, it's in an exaggerated term where the child wants to get rid of the parent or of one of the parents, but I do think it seemed to be attempting to give some commentary on how stressful the being at home can be and how stressful being parents can be. That's what I feel. I mean, I've witnessed kind of like, my mom more specifically. So like, and how stressful it can be, and I help as much as I can. But you know what I mean? I can't. I'm not a parent, so I don't really know, and I don't really. And if I am a parent one day, I don't think I'm. I like older kids in general. I would rather be with a little bit older kids. But the point is that I do think it was trying to do that, and I think to a point it did it pretty well. I think it definitely specified how Suzette was feeling, and it validated her feelings as well as maybe even Hannah's feelings in a way. Like it does give validation to the feelings that she may have, because there are people, I think there are people that would that might feel very stressed with being parents, and maybe people don't always validate those feelings. And I do think all feelings are valid, and I think that this book did a really good job at pretty much pointing it out, that all feelings, whatever feelings you may have, are definitely valid. And it also does a great job at recognizing the simple fact that that some parents definitely do their best. They do our best, but that doesn't mean their child is getting everything that they need. And sometimes it may not be their fault. Okay. Sorry. Anyway. So sometimes it may not be necessarily the parents' fault. Sometimes they do their best. Sometimes they get very frustrated. Other times they're like the dad in this book who, until he kind of realized, oh my gosh, something the hell is wrong, they're not going to get their daughter help. So I find that to be really interesting to comment on. And I think the book did a really good job at kind of bringing that to the forefront and giving their readers a view of that. So I think it did good with that. Other things I would definitely mention, I think that this book did pretty well, was just the just making me feel as a reader that Suzette was in real danger. Honestly, this child's sophistication for planning, everything that this child does is premeditated, and it is they're calculated attacks to a mother she believes is a witch who cast a spell on her father, who did who she even, like, you know, she believes that her mother cast a spell on her dad, and she's like, I want to get rid of her, so that because she genuinely thinks that her mom cast a spell, and that she, her mom, is trying to take her dad away from her. And I think it's kind of interesting because while the child seemingly has issues and might be a bit of a sociopath, there is a moment where she definitely shows remorse. So or at least guilt in one way. But I do think, or at least it scared her. But I definitely think she could be a sociopath or something. She definitely has some psychological issues. A lot of the things that she is describing are, you can tell, are childish, and the author did a really good job at giving us the point of view of the child in a way that feels like it genuinely feels like a kid. Now, and it's not necessarily reasonable. Sometimes kids don't think reasonably. They think this is it. This is how things work, and this is how it is. And because they don't think reasonably, we can't necessarily always fault them. But also, in this case, we kind of have to, because there was a you know, a person in danger, you know what I mean? So it is a very interesting look at that. And honestly, I like the psychological thriller aspect of it. It kind of reminded me of watching Death Note, except without the whole taking over the world thing. And also, one last thing that I found interesting that the author did, and I did not think it was possible, there was a point at the end where I really did feel empathy for Hannah. And I definitely felt a lot of empathy for her. And I did not think the author would be able to make me feel sympathy for her at any point in time. She was a little too much for me, and I didn't hate her, but I also didn't love her, right? So it was kind of interesting that the author got me to feel some empathy by the end. So yeah, that is my review of Baby Teeth. Again, I generally don't read these books, but hey, here I am. So next week we are going back to the romance genre with what is that called? Oh yeah, His Until Midnight. Honestly, I don't want this book in my memory. I'm so happy to review it, and just it won't be in my memory for that long. I'm glad I'm reading better books, including American Gods by Neil Gaiman. But this book that I'm going to review next week, you'll understand. You will understand, I am sure. So yeah, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on Baby Teeth if you've read it. Also, before you go, again, a quick reminder, consider subscribing to my channel. I post usually Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That way there will be something for people to watch when they wake up, whenever that might be. I'm usually sleeping when these videos are published, for the record. So yeah. So that'll be something for you to watch if anything. Also consider subscribing to my blog, where I share my writing in both book reviews and creative work. I do talk a lot about my writing, so you can definitely check out my writing and see if you like it. And with that, I'll see you next time. Until then, consume stories. Bye. Hi, editing me. So there is a point in the I did not touch in the review, and honestly, I don't want to refilm this, so we're going to touch it here. So there is a nitpick I have with this book that I somehow forgot to mention, and sort of remember now that while I was listening to it, but also while I was writing the review for my blog, linked in the description, by the way. But one of the things I kind of forgot to mention in this review is, and my definite gripe on this book, is that there is a little bit of ableism. There is one part where there is ableism in this book. And it is a scene where it is a part where specifically disabled children, or children who require a more specialized or accommodated education, are called quote, imperfect children by Suzette as the character. I wanted to point this out because I found this to be a problematic aspect of the book. Disclosure, when something is problematic, does not mean that I am trying to push you away from it as a reader. I'm just acknowledging that it's a problem for me, and also hopefully warn other potential readers so that they don't, in case they don't want to read anything problematic, so they don't have to read it. But this to me is something that speaks ableist, because it sets a very, in my opinion, dangerous standard that if you have a disability, you are not a perfect person, when perfection is... Thank you, Aylin. When perfection is not a thing. Perfection is not something that's achievable. There's no such thing as a perfect child. And being able-bodied does not make you perfect. So I found that this to be slightly careless when you have her call them imperfect children. However, I do want to give the caveat that there are people in life who might think like this. And there are people who genuinely believe this to be true. And a lot of this has to do with the way disability is portrayed, mainly in pop culture or mainstream media, which is based on the medical model of disability. There are two models of disability, the medical model and then the social model. The medical model of disability suggests that the world does not have to make any changes for you, that you have to conform as someone with disability, that you have to compromise, and that you have to kind of force yourself in a way and do whatever you can to accommodate yourself to the world. This is when you, as someone with a disability, I'm just like, this world is not made for me. It is made for a majority, and that is you who are able-bodied people. The medical model of disability also says that they need to do everything they can to fix us, to heal us, because apparently we are broken because we are disabled. So it doesn't want to accommodate people with disabilities. It wants to fix them so that they are normal. The social model of disability suggests that it is society who needs to change to accommodate people with disabilities. I subscribe to the social model if it wasn't obvious, but the medical model of disability, in my opinion, this is not research, but in my opinion, has inspired stereotyped representations of disabilities and ableism in general as it is thought by other people. It has also brought on the horrendous representations that we have seen before. Some of it has gotten better, but it's basically brought on inspiration porn, which is basically when you objectify someone with a disability. You put them on a pedestal and use them to make people who are able-bodied feel better. Now I should not explain why this is bad, but in case I have to, here's the explanation. This is bad because you're not treating people with disabilities as people. You're going disabled first, people later. So the disability becomes the biggest part of whatever story you're telling. And ableism is born out of that too. And a lot of the things that I want to say is that ableism in some people is misguided. In my experience, there is ableism that is misguided, and there is ableism that is purposeful. The misguided ableism comes out of ignorance. These people, ignorance or just lack of knowledge. So these people are usually, they're well-intentioned. They want to help or do their best, and sometimes even understand, and unintentionally, oh God, I can't talk. Unintentionally, they jump to ableism. They unintentionally use ableist either terms or thoughts in general. So a really good example of this would be, I considered this a little, maybe not necessarily termed in a way, but basically, I would, no one has said something completely ableist to me fully. But good examples of this, I think small amounts of ableism, in my opinion, are, for example, if I am with a sighted person, and we are going somewhere, anywhere, what will end up happening is that the person will skip me when in a conversation when I'm asking for something, and they'll ask the sighted person next to me. A really good example is that story I told you guys about when I was traveling to when I was traveling from Dominican Republic to the United States in January of 2022, where basically I was telling the agent what I needed, and he completely ignored me, and he went to my aunt and he's like, "Does she need a wheelchair?" And I had to yell at him in order for him to even start paying attention to me. I find that to be ableist, and it could be misguided. I do want to say that it could be misguided ableism. Other examples include, for me, at the doctor's office. I went to a doctor's office one day, and there was this guy that's like, "Oh, is she alone?" And she's like, and like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, you can't be by yourself." I'm like, "Excuse me? What do you mean I can't by myself?" I yelled at the guy or whatever. She's like, "I'm just trying to make sure, you're careful." I'm like, I get it, but you don't say that. So things like that, I think, are small, teeny tiny examples of what I believe to be, at times, misguided ableism, even slightly. I think the purposeful ableism are the people who know this is wrong and still do it. These are people that are genuinely educated and are still ableist to a point. I don't have exact examples right now, but I feel like ableism is one of those things that in small amounts is around us. And as best as we can, we should definitely combat it. When it comes to this book specifically, I want to give the caveat that it is possible that I'm not saying that the author is ableist. That's the caveat. That I'm not saying that the author is ableist. I'm saying that Suzette as a character either has ableist thoughts out of being misguided, or just is ableist. There are, I think, people like Suzette who think the way they do, like other people do. So I want to give it a caveat that it is possible that the author simply meant it as part of Suzette's character, in which case it's understandable, but I do think it is important to point out ableism like this if read. So that is something I wanted to touch on briefly, even though I went on a slight tangent on what I consider ableism to a point. So it is something, it's not just words that are ableist, there are actions that are too. And yeah, I thought I would point it out. So that is a gripe I have with the book, and I'm not saying anything about the author. I don't know the author. Judging the author would be wrong. I'm not saying the author is ableist, but at least the character is. I hope that the author has, I guess, either if they did it intentionally for the character, makes sense, but I hope the author is aware that this kind of comes off as ableist. This specific part of the book does come off as ableist. I hope they're aware of that. My writing advice for this is, listen, write what you want, but be aware of what you're sending out, because that's, yeah. So yeah, there are terms and there are things that I think come off as that can come off ableist and really concerning. And this is one of those things that I just wanted to point out. So I'm gonna go now before I continue on a rant that was not meant to be here. Thank you for watching. Do everything else I already said about subscribing to my channel, my blog in the description. Also, comment, like the video, and I'll see you next week for all right, here's Until Midnight. And until next time, consume stories. Bye.